Player coming at you with my first chaotic video. It's a real video for anyone who doesn't fully understand the rules of chaotic. So these are a bunch of my cards. Of Fire, Water, Wisdom. Again, Outperform Power 5 and Initiative Fire, so you're probably gonna go first. I love Newman, he's amazing. I'm gonna call this my Desert Raiders deck. Ultra Rare Headmaster in Kaija. Ooh, these brand once again. Probably my favorite pull today. Elements. This is up YouTube. Speed Player here, coming at you with another match on Trade Cards Online. What is up YouTube? Speed Player here, and what I have is 288 packs of Secrets of the Lost City Alliances Unraveled.
What is up YouTube? Speed Player here, and welcome to our first episode of 10 Cards That Changed Chaotic. This is a series I thought of where I will make a list of 10 cards per video and discuss the effects they've had on the game in terms of how the existence of that card has greatly affected the way that you either build decks or you consider when playing an opponent, or how decks are based around them, or how they just have a really cool ability or something like that. I just kind of thought of this on a whim. I thought I'd see how it goes. I really think this could be an interesting series for me, since, you know, deck reviews and TCO matches are some of my favorite things to do, and I love them. I wish I could do card openings more, but that isn't really possible. But this is more of an intellectual thing that I thought I could do with you guys, because we all know Chaotic is a very cool game and a lot of interesting aspects. And yeah, so without further ado, let's get into your 10 cards. Okay, so you can't talk about the metagame without talking about Zamul. Zamul's ability is so uniquely powerful that just having him open as a card opens up so many doors for you. Okay, so many decks revolve around music and abilities. Like, even take my most recent deck, Phoenix Rising. If I fight a Zamul, that deck gets immediately shut down. I can't do anything. And so many decks depend on music, maybe not as a total crutch, but just in that sense. You're talking about your Refrain of Denial, your Rhyme of the Reckless. If you're facing a burn deck and your opponent has Zamul, you're shut down. If you're using a burn deck, you're basically good because they can't stop you. So many things depend on Zamul. Expend decks, those would be shut down. I've seen decks based entirely around a Drabe that gets shut down. Basically, Zamul is worth anything anyone says about him, because having someone who shuts down anything and everything has changed the game. And just his addition has made people include Song of Stasis more. If you have a burn deck, have extra burn in case you face a Zamul, take him out immediately. Have a Myth or Mirage. I can't even begin to state the fear that you get. And this is all in one card. When you think about Chaotic as an entirety, there's so many individual cards that try to shut down Mujin abilities. Dranikus Threshold, Runic Grove, Rapasak Condensation Ceremony, Super Cooled Rain, Whirling Whale, Ice Disc. So many things try to do what Zamul does simply by being engaged, okay? Totally worth as an Ultra. Your list of things that are trying to do what he does just goes on and on. So basically, he's all that wrapped up in one package, and that's how he is possibly the #1 card that has changed the game. Simply by existing and being engaged, you're going to give your opponent a massive headache. Alright, let's move on to your next card, and that is Zerium Armor. Zerium Armor is one of the most quintessential battle gears that have ever been introduced, okay? Let's just think about for a fact how many times you've tried to make a deck that just deals more damage. You give this Underworlder a Web Crack, you give this guy a Vile Driver, you add those 2 Awakeys for extra 5 damage each on your strike, you put in that Sands of the Unseen for extra 10, you include Mithrim Oasis, Fanfare of the Vanishing, Bodal's Dagger decks, Marillion Chieftain decks adding 10 on each challenge. Zerium Armor takes away all that advantage. 20 cap, and that's it. That takes away your big attacks. Mega Roar, Super Cooled Rain, Magnemite, all gone. this this gear is a nightmare. If you have no gear destruction and your opponent has high energy, you are literally screwed. It's almost impossible to beat a high energy Zerium armor deck if you have no gear destruction, okay? If you faced an Ixik with Zerium armor, you know what I'm talking about. That is absolutely terrifying to see. And let's not forget how this is added to your individual tribal strengths, okay? The Overworld, the tribe that is at the absolute best at healing, you give this in an this is Maxor's battle gear, and more often than not, you see Pop with Zerium armor. It's there for a reason. You couple a tough fighter with damage stopping ability that is every single time with healing, you're unstoppable. You couple Zerium armor with healing, you're capping damage, and then you just recover. You know how many hits you can take. If you have 65 energy, you can take 4 hits, and even if you only heal that extra 5 or so, say you're at 20, you heal up to 25, that means you can take 2 attacks, okay? You think about this when you want to put in that gear grinder. It's like, maybe I should put in that extra gear destruction, because Zerium armor can literally win you a match just by being there, and that is how this card has changed the game. Let's move on to the next one, and this is a bit of an unusual one, but I've chosen Core for this next one. Now let me explain just for a moment. So, Koror is obviously one of the most unique war beasts out there, and I don't mean unique just because it's on his card. I mean highest recklessness, okay? That recklessness 50 means you have to base your entire conjurer strategy around taking that down and dealing with it, okay? That means you have to have 2 conjurers and a 1 or 2 Ravita flowers, okay? Now, if you're a smart player, you can do this with even 1 conjurer, but still, that recklessness 50 means that he's not just off to the side, he's taking center stage, okay? And let's talk about his stats and energy for a moment. Second highest scan energy to the game, in the game, only second to flipped over Ani. His courage, power, and speed off the charts. Courage and speed are the best stats for Mepedians, and he does great in them. This guy revolutionized stat decks for the Mepedians. Over 100 in both, plus over 100 in your power, means that you can run those high challenge stat decks. I'm talking reactive resolution, acceleration, charge of the brave, and potentially get full damage, okay? The amount of decks I've seen with him and those stats, amazing. And it's not like they're bad decks either. They're good decks. They're strong decks. You have a high energy fighter, and you have, if you get yourself into a position where you've gotten rid of his recklessness, he is the epitome of tanks, okay? That's all you want in a fighter. High energy and high in your stats, and it doesn't get much higher than Koror. Plus, when you consider the addition of Ninrin in Alliances Unraveled, Ninrin became his best friend, okay? 90% of decks with Koror in stats, he's with a Ninrin. Ninrin is an amazing war beast, and he only complements Koror, and because of these kinds of things, that's why Koror changed the game. On to our next one of the most, if not the most, popular attacks, Supercooled Rain. Now let's just consider for a moment the tribes we have to work with. We have the Marillions, the Overworld, the Underworld, Danians, and Mepedians. Now, of those tribes, the Marillions, the Overworlders, and the Danians have basically mastery of water. That's 60% of your tribes, 3 out of 5, being able to use this element. So it is the most popular element, and this is one of your most powerful attacks, okay? Let's look at the factors of this attack. High damage, okay? One of the highest damage dealing attacks there is. Mega Roar can equal it. Discipline Destruction can get a bit higher. Mind Mash, Armageddon, but these are getting into your high-end attacks, okay? So this one, you're running 60% of decks are able to run it, and one of the most important parts is the music removal. Only a few other things can remove music counters, and like I said with Zamul, you take away someone's ability to use their music and abilities that their deck is built around, you're basically crippling them. That is why Super Cool Rain is possibly the most annoying attack ever. If you've ever played somebody with Super Cool Rain, and say you played your sibling in Chaotic, they had it and you don't, and they play it, it is so frustrating, okay? Sure, you can play some Muji counters on response, but you're losing 4. And in your average deck, let's say Underworlders and Mepedians, and even Danians, not so much the Danians, but those other two tribes that are not notorious for their high counters, that is either all or a large chunk of your Mujic that is gone and wasted, and your deck is potentially screwed. That is why this attack alone is why I have been running things like Adaptive Progression, why things like Aegis Area became popular, why Elemental Negation, and anti-water decks. You look at Illusionary Lake, this alone became a reason why I've just decided to put Illusionary Lake in decks that don't run water. Or if you look at anti-water decks and why those make sense, it's not just something you feel like making, it's because so many decks run this thing and it works. You have any water deck, wisdom, power, speed, courage, I don't care what it is, you can find a way to fit this in, and it's never a bad idea to put it in. And when you look at things that can be entirely based around it, let's just look at the fact that you don't even need water to have the Mujic removal, okay? Even if you lose your water, sure, you only get 15 damage, but you're always going to have that Mujic removal, unlike Dead Water Devastation. And there are things that, like Nequin Cycle decks, one of my favorite kinds of decks, are entirely based around bringing this thing back to annoy people like Afjack. Hey, Afjack, sorry about that. But, Super Cold Rain, just one of those things, yet you never want to face it, but when you have it, man, is it fun to play. And that's why this card has changed the game. On to our next one, and I'm going to talk about another water-based card, Lord Van Bloot, the Servant of Ani. Okay, another one of the most meta cards in existence. First of all, let's just talk about the fact that he gave the Underworld a much-needed infusion into the dimensions of water. He was a different kind of Underworlder. High courage, low power, higher wisdom. He still has his classic 2 Muji counters and Earth, but he's the Grim Reaper of elements. Like, you've got two kinds of decks. You got elements, you got stats. There's some overlap. You got that 1% of decks that are Bodil's Dagger, but so many, like, elements are absolutely massive part of the game, alright? No one really likes those creatures with no elements. You want to have creatures with elements. I'd rather have a creature with elements than not, because element decks can be pretty darn powerful, and he can take on all of them. He has a gear tailored specifically to him, named after him, that affects his ability greatly. Von Bloot with the Sickle, one of the most deadly combinations in the game. Him alone, and this is what I'm talking about, creatures or cards that affect the game. This is why in any element deck you have, I always think in the back of my mind, should I run a Mineral Mayhem in this deck? Because while he is an ultra rare, when you see him and you're not packing a Mineral Mayhem, man, it feels bad because he can go one-on-one, 1v6 against an entire element deck. If your courage is below 65, that's it, alright? Let's just talk about that first ability. Lose and cannot gain. So that means that your Discord of Flame is rendered useless. Your Fluid Flame is rendered useless. So many things that you have become useless. Your entire deck will become useless. And even if you have, say, some high courage fighter, like, oh, I don't know, a Maxor or a Blazvatan, that gear that's specifically tailored to him is tailored to him. So he's gonna drop your courage. And he has water and earth. So the two elements that are absolutely crucial to any courage deck coupled with elements. We're talking Riptide, Daunting Bravery, Deluge of Doom, things that can and have been run in Von Bloot decks and drop your courage by absolutely massive amounts, plus his gear, extra 10. So, when you're thinking about running that deck with no Mineral Mayhem, you better watch out, because Von Bloot is going to get your elements. Also, not to forget the fact that he's a minion, so he's good with that tribe that has absolute 100% mastery of water, the Marillions. Sure, I'm not as afraid of Recklessness 5 and Exhaust all this ones, but you throw in an Akalbi and maybe even a Gantract, and you're also looking at some OP stuff right there. And the fact that he is an Underworlder means you could throw him in with his tribal comrades, give him fire, and still have that threat of you have low courage. He may not have stuff that lowers your courage, but if your courage is already low, you are screwed. And that's why things like Scarab of Kalai became important. That's why I do consider as a real possibility running with my Kaor his Scarab. And that's all I'm going to say about Von Blut. One heck of an awesome card, and those are the reasons why he changed the game of Chaotic. Next up, we have Newman Voidland / Isaiah Mindscrying Chamber. So as long as we're on this anti-element trend, I thought I'd put in two of the most staple anti-element cards in the game in here. So just as let's review where Chaotic was at the time Newman Voidland came out. So I think at this point the only things that were removing elements were Servant Vani, of course, Elemental Denial, Illusionary Lake. Not a lot of Nocturne of the Elements. Not a lot of full up element removal. Newman Voidland changed that because location requires no cost, no abilities, nothing on your part, and it's not unique. So just being able to have 1/5 of your deck take away elements is really beneficial. And if you're using a stat deck, chances are you have some creatures with elements. So what this provided was a boost of energy for you and a hit for your opponent. And this, if we're just looking at Forge Unity, this is before Alliance was unraveled. So there's no Fluid Flame, no Vapor Wipeout, and no Earth Shape that you just have in your hand and you've been saving because you suspected your opponent had it. So I wasn't around in the early days of Chaotic, so I don't know how it was to play when there wasn't all the sets. But just by not having AU, I see severe cripples just from this location. And you always couple it with Isaiah Mindscrying Chamber. And why this fits in so well with AU, because it's the only thing aside from the Lake Cannibal Ritual Site that can stop Expend, because when it's revealed, creatures lose all elemental types, and that's all creatures. So those two Almar Parathon Racers that your opponent's burn deck has in the second row, they become useless. And I think that kind of widespread element loss is really good. And so if you're running a Bold's Dagger deck or a stat deck, you can have 30% of your location deck just be element robbing things. And I think that's great. These are some two awesome locations that are really good to use. One common, one super, and yeah, not much more I can say. That's how these change the game. And for our 7th card, I am going with one of the less popular, less flashy kinds of cards, but nonetheless useful, Lore's Chamber Recall. Now, it has one purpose. I don't care about the Mirage. And that one purpose is removing all general discards. Now, let's just take a moment and think of, off the top of my head, as many cards as I can, or decks and such, that rely on your general discard. So, starting from Dawn of Param, Castle Bodrin, Talisman of the Mandiblor, Song of Revival, Music Reprise, the Remervere the Hivebringer, Indigo Grove, what else? Any Danian Compost deck ever. Let's see, what else? Castle Momark, Bodil's Arsenal, yeah, so the basic idea is lots of decks use your general discard. It is everywhere. It can be an advantage to you. For example, my Phoenix Rising deck, I need my general discard. If my opponent has allures, I'm screwed. The reason this is a great card, and I think it's changed the game, is because A, it's just a good card to have in any deck no matter what. I've had times where I have a decent deck idea, but I'm having trouble thinking of locations. And putting in lures is never a bad idea, okay? It's not unique, so you can use two, so that's just a good filler, and then you're taking away all these threats that will come from your opponent. Another one I can think of, Strain of the Tide, that's just heal removed right there. So all these things that can help you during the game or help your opponent, if you don't want them, you can just get rid of them. And that's why I love this kind of thing. And same with Newman's and Azea, this just kind of blanket removal of stuff that's really helpful to a player, and just provides, a bit of protection and that kind of thing. Initiative power, fine. Mirage, you could do something with that. But yeah, that's how lore changed the game. And now for our 8th card, another rare Turn of the Tide, one of my personal favorite creatures, the most selfish Mandibular ever, Nequin. And the reason I love Nequin is as follows. he is a mandibler, which means he can fit in with his tribe mates, and if you want to include him in a compost deck, that's fine. He's not loyal, so you can use him in a mixed deck, which is useful because he has some unorthodox elements, and I'll get back to that in a minute. He's an elementalist, so you could do something with that. He has a music counter, that's always good. His wisdom can get to 100 max. He has great courage as well. Bad power and speed, but not really going to hold that against him. His energy maxes out at 70, which is amazing. He's not unique, so you can have two of him, and he's a badass, and that's always fun. And let's just talk about his ability and what that does. So, while unequipped, he gains Water 5 and Untargetable. This means that his creation has incentivized players to use either sacrificial battle gear or destroy your own battle gear. I don't really think anyone's destroying their own battle gear, so then you're going to have to go with sacrificial. And I really think Newman became one of the main reasons why Vial of Liquid Thought was ever used in a deck ever. And I talked about him on Super Cool Rain. Newman plus a Vial of Liquid Thought is fun as all hell, okay? You get so much. You get him instantly untargetable, more damage, and bringing back an attack. And you don't even have to use that. You can use an Ozlay's Wreck. That is really fun. If you wanted to give him Earth, you could use the Diamond of Vlark. That's cool too. Lots of sacrificial battle gears go unused, but with Newman, that gave them a chance to be used. And then I said, let's talk about his elements for a bit. If you talk about creatures that have air and water, you're going to have a pretty short list, because in order for people to have exclusively the combo of air and water, and I mean exclusive because you're in an exclusive club of, I believe it's just Newman, Olmquad, and Lamenkal, and that's it. Somebody correct me, I believe that those are the only creatures that possess this very unique element combo. Now, if you want, there are guys that just have it, but not that exclusively. There's Nemai with his 3 elements, everything but fire. Same deal with Mahine. You've got Heptad with all 4, and that's it. This is probably the most unorthodox of your dual element combos, because let's look at your other options. Fire and air, pretty classic Underworld. Same with fire earth, also applicable to the Overworld. Earth and water, staple Danian and Overworld combos. Air and earth, classic, only thing the Pedians can run, as well as fire water. So basically, everything else, I mean, fire earth is debatably either equal or worse, but all those other ones where, like, when you look on the element chart, it's either next to them or with fire, water, and air earth, like they're your closest ones and your farthest apart ones. Air water is very weird. You got a limited number of air water attacks. You've got Insanity, Twister of Elements, Winterclaw, all good attacks, but all less out there. However, Air Water does make for cool decks. You can add in Headmaster and Kaija, the Seeker of the Yard. You've always got Super Cool Rain, you've always got plenty of good water attacks, but that extra air gives it that added edge that makes Newman so very cool. Pioneer for those kinds of element decks, and that's how he has changed the game. That's all I've got on that, and on to our first music of the video, Melody of Mirage. Possibly I'm willing to bet, the most used Mepedian music, and for good reason, and one of the greatest control cards ever. So let's just look at when the set it came out in. Dawn of Param. Now, strategy-wise, Dawn of Param was not a great set, especially for the Mepedians. You're looking at fighters like Vinta and Kuhn and Jad and Prince Uninu, basically all crappy guys. This could be the one good Mepedian thing to come out of Dawn of Param, along with Trills of Diminution, Nelson Everywhere, but we'll get to that maybe in a later episode. But Melody of Mirage is one of the most powerful bang-for-your buck cards ever. Only a rare, yet if you wanted to, I would have no objection of retroactively upgrading it to a super rare. Target attack. Alright, let's review what it has first of all. So only rare, so not too hard to pull. Most people would have one. A Mepedian music that only costs 1 counter, which is great for them because Mepedians are, as you all probably know, low on music counters. Not a lot of guys with 2, only 1 guy, I think, with 3. Most have 1 or 0. So this is really good for them, easy to cast. And then making it any attack you choose except Flaming Coals, but any attack you choose deals 0 damage is absolutely OP. Like I said with Zirium Armor, so many decks, you're trying to pump up the damage, you want as much damage as possible, you put in that 3 or that 4, or multiple 3s, or multiple 3s and a 4, or a 4 and a several 2s. Your most average deck will have one huge attack that they want to get as much as possible, and they want to play to lay the hurt on because it'll usually deal 30 plus damage. And you are taking this away for one single cost. That is immeasurably good. Okay? Vial of Liquid Thought, Super Cool Rain, sure they can bring it back, but sometimes you're gonna get rid of that. You're playing. Let me put you in a familiar situation. You're playing a tough match. The cards you've drawn haven't been great. You've played a few ones. You've also had to play a few zeros. You and your opponent are getting down to the wire. You finally draw that big Mega Roar or whatever. You slap it down. You think you got the victory, and oh wait, your opponent drops a Melody of Mirage, and that's it. This is one of the single most battle-winning cards ever. I'm talking, you use this, you use it at the right time, that's the battle right there, and if it's late in the game, that's the match. And that is why Melody of Mirage is one of the most awesome cards, most awesome Mujiks ever made, and that's how it has changed the game. And on to our 10th card, Arthoa, Captain of the Zoa. And just think of Arthoa and his, again, entirely unique ability that he brings to the table. You have an element, the most common element in the game, and you're going to win all those stat checks no matter what. And he is one of those cards you base entire decks around, alright? And let's just look at what he has. Actually, no. All you need is that ability. It doesn't even matter that he has that Mujic counter. That Mujic counter is nice, but he is always that one support creature you gotta keep around, and he makes your deck, alright? This makes Mega Roar possible. Twice as more possible. Otherwise, it's hard to get, if you've tried, it's hard to get all your stats to 70 and above just by natural means, alright? That is hard to do, and if you want to have multiple fighters, that's even harder. So he makes it happen. Water decks with no water attacks are possible because of him and you getting all those stat checks. This makes Forged Unity a much better set because you got all those 2s, Directed Bravery, Instantaneous Inspiration, Fearless Strike, Brave Glint, and you can run them all as well as those 0s. I'm talking Power Cut, Valor Continuum, Think Ray. You're getting lots of damage just by having an element. And even with, I'm not a huge fan of running all stat Arthoa, and with his set, AU, you've got those 100 stat checks. We're talking Snap Acceleration, Mind Void, Traditionalist Charge, hard to use. 100 stat checks, that's high, hard to use. You can use them all now. Glacial Balls, Magnemite. He just blasted open the door on so many attacks. And that's not even considering the fact that he's not loyal. So just anybody with water, or you give anybody water, which is not hard to do, believe me. Orcus Undin, and two Orcus Undin, 2 Shard of the Staunch, you could take guys that didn't have water at all and just make everybody have water. And even with his tribe mates, he makes them stronger, alright? You guys have seen me use my Captain of the Elements deck. You use Arthoa with some strong overworlders, namely Intress. You got Tangus Toborn, you got Loma. You add their elements with stats, making that happen, piling on the damage, extra strike, extra cycle, extra energy. He just makes a deck so much more diverse, and all you need is a little H2O. And that is your 10 cards that have changed Chaotic, guys. I hope you enjoyed this little bit that I've done. Sorry for the long video, but I really enjoyed making it. I have no idea how much fun it is to just sit down and yell about Chaotic at my laptop. If you have anyone that alright, so this was a lot of fun for me to make. This is episode 1. There will be an episode 2. If you want to see an episode 2 sooner rather than later, please click that like button, give it a big thumbs up. If you have creatures or battle gear, any card that you really want to see featured in episode 2, leave it in the comments below, and I will do it. I have compiled a large list of things I want to do, and it's only going to get bigger. Chaotic is not a small game, so this is not going to be a small series. We're going to have plenty of things to talk about, and yeah. I am Speed Player A. I thank you to those of you who sat through this over 29-minute long video, and I will see you in the next one, guys. Peace out. Have a fantastic day. See you later.